Happy Easter, everyone. Today is the second Sunday of the Easter season as we continue to celebrate Jesus' triumph over sin and death and the grace and power of God that raised him from the dead. We continue in the season where we are reminded in the most powerful way possible that no matter how awful things look, God's love and power are at work. That no matter how hopeless or discouraged we may feel, God can and will see us through. And that no matter how confused we are about God's purposes, he will still astonish us with what he will accomplish. I hope you are finding ways to keep a season of celebration going at your house in big ways and small ways. At our house, we've changed the drape on our small cross from black to white. We did that on Easter Sunday. And we're still feasting. We're enjoying the cappuccino muffins I told you about last week. And last night we had one of my all-time favorite desserts, which you must try if you've never had it. And that is, it's very simple, but I promise you're going to want 3 or 4 bowls of it if you try it. It's just stovetop chocolate pudding. You let it cool just a little bit, and then spoon it over vanilla ice cream. You got to try it if you haven't. We've also decorated our dining room table where we eat our meals. We're listening to the Easter worship music playlist on our YouTube channel, offering prayers of Easter thanksgiving. And every sunrise I saw this week reminded me of Easter morning. But I have to tell you, I'm also starting to feel a little stir-crazy from all this staying at home. Some cabin fever. I normally very much look forward to being at home or to coming home to have a chance to rest and be refreshed, to recharge. But I'm starting to mind the lack of regular connections with you, with our family, and with our other friends. Today I want to revisit the ideas from a sermon I preached several weeks ago on the first Sunday of February. You may remember that in January, our January sermon series reviewed our mission statement at Mennonite Church. I think it was unforgettable because we repeated that mission statement every week for at least 5 weeks running, so you may remember the 3 phrases. I hope you do. Can you say them with me? The first one was enjoying God, loving each other, and blessing our neighbors. In the 4th sermon in that series, on February 2, I called for us to give a special focus to blessing our neighbors in 2020. You may want to go back and listen to that sermon if you don't remember it or if you didn't get to listen to it then. It's on our website. It's in our podcast stream, so you can get it there as well. I told you at the time that I thought 2020 would be a unique chance for us to amaze ourselves and to amaze our neighbors by not getting caught up in the outrage, the anxiety, and the turmoil of what that was likely to be stirred up by a presidential election. And what I said back then was, what a great opportunity for us to respond boldly as followers of the Prince of Peace, as followers of the mighty God, the wonderful Counselor, the everlasting Father, as followers of the Lord of Lords. And I said, let's live out our mission boldly as the people of God by being grounded in our enjoyment of God, by loving each other really well, and by being especially outstanding in how we bless our neighbors. But I had no idea then that just a few weeks later, we would be under a stay-at-home order and that most of our usual ways of connecting with each other would be shut down. And that our attention would be focused on something entirely different, something we hadn't thought at all about, a pandemic. And I've recently been pondering the question, how does this change or how does this impact our vision or our focus for 2020? And I've been wondering, how would that sermon have come out differently if we could have seen ahead into April and had somehow known what was coming? If someone had told us that day on the first Sunday of February that just 2 months later, by the end of March, there would be a worldwide shutdown of almost all public spaces, including our own worship services, we would have thought that person was nuts. We might have been polite, but we would have probably smiled and said, well, I think we'll wait and see about that. And yet here we are. It's incredible to realize that this is already the 6th week of worshiping together by video in this format. This is already the 6th week. And I want to invite you today to think with me about what it would mean if we would approach this stay-at-home situation with the mindset that I invited you to take on several weeks ago. So the question is, what does it mean for us now to be grounded in our enjoyment of God, to be loving each other really well, and to be outstanding in how we bless our neighbors? The presidential election is still out there. We'll get back to that. But for now, let's focus on navigating social isolation, cabin fever, and maybe the fear of a deadly illness. I want to revisit 2 scripture texts from February with our current situation in mind. The first one has to do with who we are, or what we're like inside, and the second one has to do with what we do with our actions, our behavior. The first text comes from John 16. Jesus is at the Last Supper. He's preparing his disciples for what's about to happen, which is that their world is about to be upended. He tells them that I've come to you from the Father, and I'm about to return to him. That the time has come where you're all going to be scattered into your own homes. You're going to leave me all alone, and yet I won't be alone because my Father will be with me. And then verse 33, what he says is, I have told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. I've told you that your world is about to be upended and everything that you're counting on is going to go away so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. What he's telling them here is that he is Lord. He's announcing his authority and his lordship to them, essentially saying, I am the Lord of these circumstances. And he's telling them, no matter what happens, no matter what you face, you can trust my authority that comes from God the Father. As we read this text today, this might be as if he had said to us, I have told you that a pandemic is coming so that you may have peace in me. That might sound a little strange to us, but I think he might say to us, I've been ripening the fruit of the Spirit in your life so that you will be ready for the trials and sorrows that you may face. They're still going to hurt. They're still going to be challenging. That's why we call them trials and sorrows. But take heart. You can weather them because I've overcome the world. I am the Lord. So one question I have for you this morning is, how are you holding up under the trials and the sorrows of this weird new reality of staying at home? What's trying you right now? What's making you sad? I told you that I'm going a little stir crazy sometimes, and I feel a little disoriented at times, and I get confused about what day of the week it is. But some of you are facing much bigger challenges right now. Some of you are in households that are too full of people. Some of you have lost your jobs, or your work or your income has slowed down a lot. Some of you are separated from family or from friends, maybe from a person who's over 75 years old who needs to be really careful right now. Or maybe you live alone and are lonely. Whatever your particular trial or sorrow, I urge you to reach out to someone for help and for encouragement, for prayer or financial support. Let's face these trials and sorrows together, encouraging each other, because we know that Jesus has overcome the world and that he will see us through, no matter what comes. Another question I have for you is, what about the trials and sorrows of your neighbors? About the people around you? Do you know how your neighbors are struggling to find peace right now? Like you, I'm seeing a lot more of my neighbors than I would be if I weren't spending so much time at home. Nita and I live at the north end of our street, which is about 1/4 of a mile long. It's a connector that connects 2 bigger roads. There's a lovely township park at the southern end of our street. From our front door to the far end of the park and back is about a 2-mile loop. So if we walk that distance, because we're at the north end of the street, on that 2-mile loop, we go by almost all of the 30 or so houses on our street. Last Sunday evening, Easter Sunday evening, we set out around 6:30 in the evening for the park to walk that 2-mile loop. And we ran into Kevin and Janet, who stopped to chat. But they live right across the street from Helen's house. Helen was sitting on her porch, so she walked over and joined us. And then all of us kind of stood there in the street and stood weirdly about 8 feet apart, having a conversation that we would ordinarily have been much closer together to have. And as the 4 of us chatted, Eugene came out of his house and joined us. And then Brandon and Megan walked by on their way to the park with their 4 young children. As we stood there, we talked about how we're all doing, and I have to confess that we were all a little grumpy about the circumstances. We found out that, we knew that Helen is the director of nursing at a retirement home. There's no COVID virus there, but they're very tense and very vigilant about preventing it there. And there's a lot of anxiety about the virus in this retirement home. Janet does childcare, so she has no work right now, but she's strongly extroverted, and she's minding the shutdown a lot. Her husband, Kevin, is still working, but mostly from home. And Eugene is retired, but he's not able to go to the places that he's used to going. So we caught up with them and commiserated a bit with them. And as we walked on, Nita said to me, we should sit out in our front lawn every evening so that we can connect with all the people who are out walking right now. Friends, I want to invite you to open yourselves to your neighbors, keeping Jesus' promise in mind that we're looking at this morning. I have told you, he said, that great trouble is coming, so that you may have peace in me. Remember that here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Friends, Jesus invites you to receive his peace. And I think he's saying to us in this verse, you're going to be such a blessing to your neighbors and the people around you simply because of how peaceful you are in facing the trials and sorrows of your life, knowing that I have overcome the world. The second text that we looked at in February is about what we do, about our actions and our behavior. Paul says in chapter 4, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders, making the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. These are very simple instructions. They're simple to say, they're simple to understand, but sometimes they're very hard to do. So they're simple in design, but not in execution. But I think they relate directly to our situation in these days. And I invite you to take them to heart, to devote yourselves to prayer, to be watchful and thankful, to be wise in how you relate to the people around you, and to let your conversations always be full of grace, which I take to mean building up rather than tearing down, being kind and thoughtful in the ways that we speak to other people. Ask the Lord to equip you to live this way, not just during the stay-at-home order, but beyond that as well. I also want to remind you this morning that we're not blessing our neighbors in these ways because it's the nice thing to do, because we know that church people are nice people, so we should be nice at every opportunity. No, not at all. I mean, yeah, that's fine to be nice, but that's not why we do this. We're blessing our neighbors because we're living out of the overflow of God's love in our lives. Let's let this picture represent God and him pouring out his love and his life into the cup that represents you or me. Imagine that as God pours out his love and his life, his very self into us, of course we're going to be enjoying God as he pours that out into our lives, as he pours himself into our lives. And as that spills over, as it fills us up and spills over, that spills over into us loving each other, represented here by the saucer, which in turn overflows and spills over into our blessing of our neighbors. It's the life and the love of God himself that's poured into us, that overflows and that spills out into us, blessing our neighbors. And as we do that, spills over into impacting the world. Friends, God's call to us in this year, I think, is still very much for us to be blessing our neighbors as God's love and life and grace overflow in our lives. With all of this in mind, I want to offer you two specific ways that you can bless your neighbors, that we can bless our neighbors in the week to come. Each of these ways is connected to a document that we've posted on our online resources page at mjmc.org. On the home page, there's a tab at the top that says Discover. If you click on that, it'll give you a pull-down menu, and one of the options there is Online Resources. Or you can search the website for the word online or the word resources, and that page should pop right up. The first document is an up-to-date list of current needs of the Mount Joy Food Bank. We just got this updated list a few days ago, and we've posted it there for your use. They accept donations on Wednesday and Friday mornings when they're open from 9 in the morning to 11 in the morning, and I urge you to drop off some food to bless your neighbors this week. The second is a document called The Art of Neighboring. It's the subtitle COVID-19 Neighboring Toolkit. There's some very practical suggestions in here for what they call COVID-informed neighboring. I've never heard that phrase in my entire life. COVID-informed neighboring, which is basically blessing people from 6 feet away. It says here on the first page, there's never been a better time to meet and connect with the people who live right outside your front door. And it's a very brief document here with some very practical suggestions for how we can bless our neighbors, how we can do that in the ways that I've been talking about this morning. And now watch this story from Dale Nisley about how he and Garnet are taking some of these steps in their neighborhood already.